Все, девочки наши отзанимались, ушли. Теперь у нас с Ваней час времени. Обычно мы в этот час делаем историю, читаем вместе полчаса. Другие полчаса Ваня занимается письмом. Или пишет в письме задания, или грамматику мы вместе делаем. Но мы грамматику закончили. Программа по спеллингу еще не пришла, поэтому мы сегодня заменим эти полчаса астрономии, которую мы делаем обычно по пятницам. Значит, возвращаемся к истории США. На каком президенте мы сейчас?
На 15-м. Эбрахам Линкольн, следующий президент.
Хорошо. Давай повторим немножко.
То есть на 16-м.
1803 год. Не подсматривать. 1803 год.
Это Луизиана Пurchase, Наполеон и Лоуренс и Кларк.
Луис и Кларк Expedition. А президент?
Джефферсон.
Молодец. Так, теперь садись сюда. Отворачивайся от листочка. Я у тебя спрашиваю, ты пытаешься...
1812, the British War.
Не спеши. Джордж Вашингтон, самое известное. Что? С чем связано его имя?
С революцией.
Революция. Джон Адамс.
Declaration of Rights.
Peace with France.
Oh.
Jefferson.
Jefferson is 1803.
1803. То, что ты сейчас сказал. Madison.
Madison, the shooting star, a war with Britain,
Very good.
1812.
Yes, Monroe.
I don't remember.
What's Monroe Doctrine? Monroe Doctrine о чем говорит?
Я помню, что такое было, но я не помню, по что это.
Это то, что европейские страны не имеют...
Hands off, and I mean it.
Yes, не имеют права больше колонизировать уже колонизированные территории в Америке. Так, что еще у них? War of 1812 тоже. Missouri Compromise, what is it?
It's the line between slaves and slaves.
Between free and slave states, да?
Yes.
Где выше этой линии нельзя больше было
Yes, except
организовывать.
Kentucky.
Но это уже позже история. Okay. Это я спрашиваю, что означает этот компромисс, а не как его нарушали. Джон Куинси Адамс. Что про него помнишь?
Yeah, no one liked him.
He wasn't very much like, was he a bad president?
He was a very just person, but he couldn't be. He was tried to be trust anyone, and he couldn't suit anyone. He tried to do a lot of good stuff, but the government just didn't like him.
People didn't like him. He was very stern man, autocratic. Okay, Andrew Jackson. Его имя с чем связано? Эндрю Джексон. Помнишь, он был военный?
Oh yeah, the hot cider and the wood cabin. Помнишь?
Okay. Что посущественней? Что такое Trail of Tears, например?
Oh, it's a law where like a lot of Indians got just thrown out of the country.
Yeah. Also depression, economic depression.
Oh.
Van Buren. What do you remember about Van Buren?
I don't remember anything about him.
No, you think well. He was Jackson's buddy.
Yes.
He helped him run for president. He was a smooth talker. Помнишь, такой был типичный политик, который...
Do you agree with us or you agree with that? Yes, of course I do.
Вот, да, это был такого типа политик и президент. И он... сейчас упадет книга. И он разгребал все, что было после Джексона касательно депрессии экономической.
И банки это сделал, что government money stay out of ungovernment banks.
Yes. Tyler, Polk and Taylor.
Тейлор и Тайлер просто все.
Просто все, что значит.
Просто начали президента и уже закончили.
Да, они очень мало были, они умерли в самом начале своего... Так, что делал Полк?
Он это... Тогда было, кажется, вот тут вот эти 13 штатов,
ну уже намного
было
больше.
Уже больше, чем 13 штатов. Потом была Луизиана и еще пару вещей. Вот тут немножко было. А он добавил Техас.
А как он его добавил, интересно?
Война была с Мексикой.
Угу. А по поводу? Чем Мексика мешала?
Мексика была on slaves, а Texas была slaves. So, uh,
Вообще-то это была территория Мексики.
да.
А почему они стали воевать, мексиканцы с американцами или наоборот?
Потому что техасские, им не нравилась Мексика, они хотели себе рабов, and they just like started building forts somewhere here. And then Mexicans were like, wait a moment, get out of here.
Ну, вообще это не совсем так. В общем, это была захватническая война, и там уже были американские поселенцы,
Да.
а когда южанам было это выгодно, чтобы расширить территории и сохранять баланс рабовладельческих и нерабовладельческих штатов,
Да.
и потом под предлогом небольшим начали войну. И эта территория отошла к США, да.
Окей, ну это... в общем, это война была, там был один генерал в Мексике,
Ну, окей,
президент.
про войну достаточно. Что еще про президента? Нам надо дальше продвигаться. Кроме войны с Мексикой,
Была еще одна война с Мексикой, там, где они Калифорнию отобрали, и был Gold Rush. И
ну,
вообще
это, да,
были.
все та же война, была отобран Техас и Калифорния. Потом началась золотая лихорадка.
Ну, а потом у Орегон и Вашингтон с этой, он оттяпал у Англии этих.
Ну, там, в общем, мирно договорились,
Да.
без войны. Хорошо, итак, нынешняя карта штатов была завершена. Да?
Да, только вот тут все это...
Давай попробуем, получится у нас или нет. Хорошо, садись. И еще президент Бьюкенен, который был least liked, да? При президенте Бьюкенен переселились мормоны в штат Юта, основали свои города. И уже конфликт между рабовладельческими и нерабовладельческими штатами настолько назрел, что войны больше избежать было невозможно. Не было ни одного человека, который предложил бы какое-то решение, чтобы не разорить юг и при этом освободить рабов.
Вот, ну, как раз это, как его, когда Abraham Lincoln got elected, but he didn't become president at once because he gets 3 months, like several months before elected, before the other president is done with his term. So as he was elected, about the same time the war started. So when he got the throne, he quickly started to fix everything, and then the Ironsides came in.
Did you like the part about Ironsides? Was it cool?
I especially like quick little boats. Especially those are like really compact, hard to hit, and even if you hit it, they have pretty hard.
Они похожи на тебя, да? Маленькие шустрые. Ну что, дальше читаем. Captain Farragut, who was already 63 at this time, was a Southerner by birth, but he had never faltered in his allegiance to the Union. Mind what I tell you, he said to his brother officers when they tried to make him desert his flag. You fellows will catch the devil before you get through with this business. And so unshaken was his faith that he was trusted with the most important naval expedition of the war, the taking of New Orleans. New Orleans is about 100 miles from the mouth of the Mississippi, and the Confederates, who were, of the Mississippi, and the Confederates, who were aware even more than the Federals of the importance of the great waterway, had from the very beginning done their utmost to secure it. 75 miles below New Orleans, 2 forts named Jackson and St. Philip's guarded the approaches to the city. These the Confederates had enormously strengthened and had stretched a great chain between them from bank to bank to prevent the passage of hostile ships. They had also gathered a fleet of ironclads and gunboats further to defend the city. But in spite of all these defenses, the Federals determined to take New Orleans, and on the 18th of April, the Union ships began to bombard the forts. The Confederates replied fiercely, and for 4 days the sky seemed ablaze and the earth shook. Then, having succeeded in cutting the chain across the river, Farragut determined to sail past the fort and take New Orleans.
Знаешь, что я вспомнил? The War with Titans.
The war what?
With Titans in the ancient
the
Greece.
Titans. Okay. At 2 o'clock in the morning, the ships began to move. The night was dark but very still and clear, and soon the noise of slipping anchor cables warned the enemy of what was afoot. Then a very hail of shot and shell fell upon the Federal boats. Burning fire ships, too, were sent down upon them, and the red light of battle lit up the darkness.
That's an actual called fire ships.
No.
It's tiny ships filled with gunpowder and like fire.
Gunpowder?
Yes. And like straw. And then when they hit the another boat, they explode.
Ah,
Sometimes they're flame ships with people. I don't know how that works, but basically, I know how it works. But like, it's stupid to just lose people because it's really dangerous. A person paddles it right into a ship and then jumps off.
All right. Yet through the baptism of fire, the vessels held on their way undaunted. The forts were passed. Do you know the word undaunted?
Unbreakable.
Ну да, как бы неустрашимые, продвигающиеся дальше. The Confederate fleet disabled and put to flight, and Farragut sailed unhindered up the river. At his approach, New Orleans was seized with panic. Filled with a nameless fear, women and children ran weeping through the streets. Business of every kind was at a standstill. The men, mostly gray-haired veterans and boys, turned the keys in their office doors and hurried to join the volunteer regiments, bent on fighting to the last for their beloved city. Thousands of bales of cotton were carried to the wharves, and there set on fire, lest they should fall into the hands of the enemy. Ships, too, were set on fire and cast loose, till it seemed as if the whole river front was wrapped in flames. 30 miles away the glare could be seen in the sky, and at the sight even strong men bowed their heads and wept, for they knew it meant that New Orleans had fallen and that the queen of southern cities was a captive. But there was no fighting, for General Lovell, who was in command of the city, marched away with his army as soon as the Union ships appeared. The citizens who were left were filled with impotent wrath and despair. They felt themselves betrayed. They had been assured that the city would fight to the last, but now their defenders had marched away, leaving them to the mercy of the conqueror. The streets were soon filled with a dangerous, howling, cursing mob, many of them armed, all of them desperate. Yet calmly through it, as if on parade, marched 2 federal officers without escort of protection of any kind. The mob jostled them, shook loaded pistols in their faces, yelling and cursing the while. But the 2 officers marched on side by side, unmoved, showing neither anger nor fear, turning neither to right nor to left, until they reached the city hall, where they demanded the surrender of the city. It was one of the bravest deeds I ever saw done, said a Southerner who as a boy of 14 watched the scene. By the taking of New Orleans, Farragut won for himself great fame. His fame was all the greater because in his fleet he had none of the newly invented ironclads. With only wooden vessels he had fought and conquered. It was a contest between iron hearts and wooden vessels, and ironclads with iron beaks, and the iron hearts won, said Captain Bailey, who served in the expedition under Farragut. After taking New Orleans, Farragut sailed up the river and took Baton Rouge, the state capital. So at length the Federals had control of the whole lower river as far as Vicksburg. The upper river from Cairo was also secure to the Federals.
What New Orleans? What Boston Harbor?
Mm-hmm.
I thought Boston Harbor is harbor. It's actually a city. Look, there's a city called Boston Harbor.
Well, when a city has a harbor, it can often bear that name.
No, it's in the country.
But Vicksburg stood firm for the South. When called upon to surrender, the governor refused. I have to state, he said, that Mississippians do not know and refuse to learn how to surrender to an enemy. If Commodore Farragut or Brigadier General Butler can teach them, let them come and try. At the time, soldiers enough could not be spared to help the fleet to take Vicksburg. So for the time being, it was left alone. Lincoln, the slaves are made free. The Federals rejoiced greatly at the successes of Grant and the Navy, and indeed they had need of success somewhere to keep up their spirits, for on the whole things did not go well. George McClellan was commander-in-chief, and although he drilled his army splendidly, he never did anything with it. He was a wonderful organizer, but he was cautious to a fault too extreme, and always believed the enemy to be far stronger than he really was. So, too cautious, even timid. He was at last dismissed and was succeeded by one commander-in-chief after another.
Mama, yeah, and they just ran into an army and got destroyed.
Well, let's see.
The opposite thing.
Let's see. Not one proved truly satisfactory. Indeed, it was not until the last year of the war, when Ulysses Grant took command, that a really great commander-in-chief was found. At the beginning of the war, no matter who was leader, the long campaigns in Virginia ended in failure for the Federals. On the Confederate side, these campaigns were led first by Joseph Johnston and then by the great soldier Robert E. Lee. Lee came of a soldier stock, being the youngest son of Light Horse Harry Lee, who had won
Lee
fame
or Yee?
During the War of the Revolution. Remember, Lee is a great Southern general.
Yes, I'm
They
just
had
joking
good
that.
generals on both sides.
I'm just joking that Yee is from Korea, great general from Korea.
see. He was a noble, General Lee. He was a noble Christian gentleman, and when he made his choice, he determined to fight for the South. He believed he was fighting for the right. With Lee was Stonewall Jackson, his great right hand, and perhaps a finer soldier than Lee himself. His men adored him as they adored no other leader. Like Cromwell, he taught them to pray as well as to fight. He never went into battle without commending his way to God, and when he knelt long in prayer, his men might feel certain that a great fight was coming. He was secret and swift in his movements, so swift that his troops were nicknamed Jackson's Foot Cavalry. Yet he never wore his men out. He thought for them always, and however urgent haste might be, he called frequent halts on his flying marches, and made the men lie down, even if it were only for a few minutes. To conquer such leaders and the men devoted to them was no easy matter, and it was not wonderful that the campaigns in Virginia marked few successes for the Federals.
Mama, я думаю, some government might be if they get mad with a good general, they might be scared to dismiss him. That, like, especially with Lee, because Lee might still fight for the North. Mm-hmm. He had chosen the South, but he still might fight for the North, and North. Mm-hmm. So if they dismiss him, he might go to the North and then attack them from the North. So they want to dismiss him, but they don't want him to go to the North.
At length, the long series of failures ended with a second, and for the Federals, disastrous Battle of Bull Run. This was followed 2 days later by the Battle of Chantilly, I believe, after which the whole Federal army fell back to Washington. Lee, rejoicing at his successes in Virginia, made up his mind then to invade Maryland, which state he believed would readily join the Confederacy. But he was disappointed, for if the Marylanders had not much enthusiasm for the Union cause, they had still less for the Confederate, and the invaders were greeted with exceeding coldness. Their unfailing good fortune, too, seemed to forsake the Confederates, and the Battle of Antietam, I don't know how to pronounce that, one of the fiercest of the war, although hardly a victory for the Federals, was equal to a defeat for the Confederates. After reading this, we will find a video, an animation, so you can see which
like
battles.
The one, the shot who ran.
Yes. Мы посмотрим, какие были битвы, чтобы ты проследил на карте, не путался, и они более правильно произнесут название, чем я могу прочитать. For 14 hours the carnage lasted, and when at length night put an end to the slaughter, thousands lay dead on either side. Next day, having in a fortnight lost half his army, Lee withdrew once more into Virginia. Lincoln's chief...
So Virginia is a slave state.
Yes. Lincoln's chief object in carrying on the war was not to free slaves, but to save the Union. My first object is to save the Union, he wrote, and not either to save or destroy slavery. If I could save the Union without freeing any slaves, I would do it. If I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. Gradually, however,
That would be the worst thing because those that will be left would be pretty mad.
Gradually, however, Lincoln began to believe that the only way to save the Union was to free the slaves. Many people were impetuously urging him to do it, but Lincoln would do nothing rash. It was a tremendous step to take, and the question as to when would be the right moment to take it was for him one of tremendous importance. So he prepared his Proclamation of Emancipation and bided his time. Following his own good judgment and the advice of one of his cabinet, he resolved not to announce it so long as things were going badly with the North, lest it should be looked upon as the last measure of an exhausted government, a cry for help. It was not to be sent forth into the world as a last shriek in the retreat, but as a companion to victory. But victory was slow in coming. At length, the great battle was fought at Antietam. It was scarce a victory, but the Federals had lost more men than had the Confederates. Yet it had to pass for one. And a few days after it, Lincoln issued his Proclamation of Emancipation. In this he declared that in every state which should be in arms against the government on the 1st of January 1863, the slaves should be free forevermore. This gave the rebel states more than 3 months in which to lay down their arms and return to their allegiance. And that's what he says. So if he gives them a chance to keep the slaves and stop fighting. So the outcome would be saving the Union. So if they do not give up, then the slaves would be freed, the war continue, and hopefully the Union will be saved. And that's what he said. Whatever it takes, I will save the Union. Meanwhile, the war went on. In November, General Ambrose E. Burnside was appointed commander of the Army of the Potomac. He accepted the post unwillingly, for he did not think himself great enough to fill it. It was soon proved that he was right. And at this point, we will stop. Теперь science. Тебе нравится астрономия? Или ты еще пока не решил?
It's not as interesting as history or how's it called? Pricing.
Botany.
Yes, botany.
Мы еще пока только начали, да? Okay, lesson 2, the sun. Well, we already know why the sun looks small, so I'm not gonna camp there. And you're not supposed to stare at the sun, you know that, right? So we'll skip that.
Well, it's not only because the sun blinds your eyes, also because some of the sun rays gets through a tiny bit of it and it might get in your eyes.
When one object revolve and rotate, when one object travels in a circle around another object, it is orbiting that object. In other words, it is revolving around that object. We use the word orbit or revolve to mean the same thing. One object is in the center while the other object moves in a circle around it. And so forth. Those are things you already know, so...
Вот что они имели в виду, когда сказали, что Плутон иногда ближе, чем Нептун.
Видишь, какая у него орбита интересная.
Да. Все вот так идут, а этот вот так поперек.
Все в одну сторону, а Венера, да?
Да, только у Венеры... Только Венера в другую сторону крутится, а он вообще в другую сторону повернулся.
Вы уже закончили модель планет?
Нет.
Нет еще? Ну да, закончи, пока она не растерялась. Okay, solar flares and sunspots. Вот это может быть интересно.
You guys know what такое sunspots? But...
I'm sure you do. Я просто не уверена, что ты знаешь так много,
Да,
как
да,
здесь
да.
написано. The sun is very active. The fire on the sun is jumping and hopping and rolling about, something like a campfire does. It is a huge ball of very active fire that is spinning around and around. In the large picture of the sun on the right, you can see flares of fire darting out from the sun. That is called a solar flare. It is a giant tower of fire that is many times larger than any planet in our solar system. Look at the drawing of the Earth that has been placed in the picture.
Wait, I think if the Earth is this size, this was like as high as to Jupiter's. Comme 2 Юпитера.
Look at the, so see how small the Earth is compared to the solar flare? That gives you some idea of how big it is. Solar flares burst out millions of times from the sun. The solar flares throw so much energy and electricity toward the Earth that people in the far north and the far south can see colorful electrical lights up in the sky at night caused by these flares. These lights are called auroras.
Не только by these
Северное
flares, but
сияние.
also by the sun ray. If it's really, если совсем очень большое цветное, значит это flare. А если не сильно бледное, это значит sun ray.
Sometimes a solar flare can make a burst of energy come through a city's power line so forcefully that the entire city can lose its power and electricity. Solar flares can also cause problems in telephones and radios.
Yes, depending what telephones. There's a light telephone that doesn't have problems. There's electricity telephone that it's a pretty old one. If there's a storm, it confuses. If there's radio near or a car, it also confuses.
Look at this picture of the sun. It was taken with special tools used to study the sun. Do you notice anything interesting about this picture?
It's like on the moon.
There are little dark spots on the sun. They are called sunspots.
I mean, they're not little.
Well, they look little from distance. They are spots that are cooler than the rest of the sun. They are about 7,000 degrees. That's still very hot, but much cooler than the rest of the outer part of the sun. Do you see the dark spot pointed out in the photograph? That spot is bigger than the entire Earth. Some are so big that they are 10 times bigger than the Earth.
Or 15.
Many scientists believe that sunspots affect the weather here on Earth. You see, when the number of sunspots on the sun is large, the sun is actually hotter than when the number of sunspots is small. This may seem strange to you, since the sunspots themselves are cooler than the rest of the sun.
So the rest of the sun gets even hotter.
However, scientists think that sunspots result in more activity in the sun, so the sun actually gets hotter when there are more sunspots. Without sunspots,
Actually it's the other way. When the sun gets hotter, sometimes there's more. Usually there's more sunspots.
the chicken or the egg, which comes first? Without sunspots, the Earth would be cooler than it is today. This happened a few hundred years ago, 1645 to 1710. During those years, scientists could not see any sunspots on the sun, and the Earth was many degrees cooler than normal. In the same way, if there were too many sunspots, the Earth would get really hot, and the rain would not fall as often. This would cause severe droughts on the Earth. Droughts are long seasons with no rain. When it doesn't rain, the plants die. Without the plants, many animals die as well. People also depend on rain to live.
Not many animals. Without plants, all animals might die because
Eventually, yes. But there are some animals who are tougher than others, right?
Yes.
God designed the sun, our sun, with sunspots to help the Earth stay at the right temperature. Everything in the universe is God's design. He has taken special care with every feature of the universe to protect us on Earth, as we have seen many times already. Alrighty. These are activities. Did you know that God designed the sun to get its power by little explosions that happen over and over again deep inside the sun?
Like 1 trillion times per second.
Something called thermonuclear fusion is making all those little explosions. That's a big word, but now you know it. So next time someone asks you how the sun gets its power, tell them thermonuclear fusion. What is even more exciting is that thermonuclear fusion makes the sun brighter and brighter each year. Can you believe the sun is actually getting hotter and hotter as it gets brighter and brighter? It is. Thermonuclear fusion tells us that there could not have been life on Earth billions or even millions of years ago.
Because then the sun right now would burn everything.
You see, since the sun is getting brighter and brighter each year, if we were to go back in time, we would see the sun getting dimmer and dimmer each year. In fact, if we were to go back billions of years, the sun would have been so dim or faint that it could not have provided enough warmth for life on Earth.
Знаешь, что мне это бла-бла напоминает?
Что?
The one player from Minecraft, he likes doing jokes, and he made himself.
You mean telling jokes?
No, making jokes.
Oh, okay.
In Minecraft.
Pranks?
Yes, pranks.
Mm-hmm.
And his name is, and he made, and even his name is a joke. Like he made a name, and it's like XYWBHOCFX plus A plus H.
Have you remembered it?
Yes.
Oh boy. Okay, let's go back to the book. If temperatures on Earth were much cooler than they are now, there would be terrible consequences. Oceans would freeze and it would be winter all the time. Even with the sun's current high temperature, Antarctica is still very, very cold. Scientists have discovered that the sun would have been many times cooler, actually more than 30% cooler, if it were here billions of years ago. No life could have survived on the Earth if the sun were that cool, because the Earth would have been a frozen chunk of ice water,
Like Pluto.
with frozen land scattered about. Not a single thing could survive such temperatures. This gives us good evidence that life on Earth is young, certainly not millions or billions of years old, as some might want you to believe. All right. Should we continue, or is it enough?
I think it's enough.
It's enough. All right.